Gemar Chatima Tova, everyone. Lovely to be here together on such a holy day. Kol Nidre draws us in with its haunting melody, its historic and mythic associations, its solemn and dramatic ritual setting, and its strategic location leading us into the Yom Kippur fast. This year, as I meditated in preparation, I pondered the question, why do we repeat Kol Nidre 3 times? None of the Machzorim explain it. Some note that it should be done precisely as Rabbi Light did so beautifully this evening, with the first repetition done hesitantly in a low voice, and each following repetition growing in confidence as we approach the awe, majesty, austerity, and gravity of the moment and the day before the Sifrei Torah and before God. Well, it actually turns out that 3 recitations is actually not universal. For example, in Worms, Germany, Kol Nidre is done only twice, while in Aleppo, Syria, it is recited 7 times. Some state that since Kol Nidre should be linked to the timing of Yom Kippur, that it should be recited as many times as needed until the moment that the community can properly begin the Yom Kippur Mariv evening prayers. So why has so much of the Jewish world landed on 3? Those that make a comment state that, well, 3 repetitions are traditional, which is not really an answer. Well, in an introduction to the Machzor that he edited and commented on, Rabbi Jonathan Sacks, the late chief rabbi of the British Commonwealth, and of no known relationship to any other Rabbi Sacks who may be in the room presently, offers a possibility. He writes that in the old world, if you had a grievance and could not get a hearing, you could go to the synagogue and bang on the Torah reading table 3 times. Chop the table 3 times, yes, and the service would be delayed until an acceptable plan to hear your problem was arranged. Quite a dramatic scene when you think about it, and something quite moving that the community couldn't daven until everyone in the room was at least satisfied that their pain would be addressed. According to Rabbi Sacks, this old world remedy for communal conflict found its way into Yom Kippur evening by our repeating Kol Nidre 3 times as a symbol of the need to listen and be heard. Kol Nidre reminds us to listen to others. Hearing this helps me to frame current important social movements. The Me Too movement protests are a striking of the Torah table to call out the shameful reality of discrimination, harassment, and sexual violence against women that remains pervasive in our society, and including to recent reports in our military. We might also want to think of the Black Lives Matter protests following the murder of George Floyd. Thousands of people took to the streets then and banged on the metaphoric Torah table of America, crying out, "Enough is enough. No more business as usual. We demand to be heard." And the same can be said for the way white, rural, working class America has turned. And they are saying, we've had enough. You can't ignore us anymore. Our jobs are disappearing. Our towns are dying. We're ravaged by the opioid epidemic. We demand a hearing. There is a lot of pounding on the Torah table, and we haven't yet done much except judge the pounders of the table. But as Rabbi Sachs reminds us, the Jewish way is not to judge somebody for hopping on the table. What Jews do is say, oh my goodness, somebody is in pain, somebody is hurting. Whether they are white, black, male, female, trans, whoever, our job is to make a plan to say we are going to listen to you and try to address your needs. And only then can we feel good about davening. God can wait a few minutes. God's an adult. One of the most potent symbols of these Yamim Noraim, these days of awe, is the shofar and its shrill, startling sound. But as Neil can tell you, the mitzvah is actually not to blow the shofar, otherwise we distribute one to everyone. The mitzvah, as the bracha he recited tells us, is actually to hear, lishmoa kol shofar, to wake up from our moral and ethical slumber. Wake up. A new year is here. Wake up and listen to the cry of the oppressed, to the vulnerable. Wake up and listen. So the first Kol Nidre table pounding that calls to me this evening is the airing of grievances, the demand for a hearing from many quarters in our public square. People want to be heard. And leaders on all sides of the aisle, not to mention the rest of us Americans, need to do a better job of listening and addressing. But the need to listen to others is powerful in our private world as well. How often do we feel heard? How well do we listen to each other? It's humbling to think about. When I review the last year, more often than not, my conflict with someone's was really over communication. I'm in a conversation and I misunderstood what the other person said, or worse, I presume to understand why that person said what they said. What chutzpah. I didn't ask, I didn't inquire, I assumed I knew what they intended. I get distracted or tired or triggered. But either way, I either stop listening or I don't really hear what the other person actually said, let alone catch the urgency of it. These kinds of miscues remind me of cell phone ads where the reception is poor and the person on the receiving end of the phone call always incorrectly hears a key part of the conversation. In one, it's the couple's anniversary, and he says, I love you, and she hears, I bought glue. Another concerns a business dinner. One caller advises the other to wear something basic that doesn't make her look like she's attending a costume party. Unfortunately, with bad reception, the woman only heard costume party, attends the dinner in a medieval gown with a matching headpiece, ready to gnaw on an oversized turkey leg. And it is not just verbal communication that's a problem. Email is even worse. We read it too quickly or only half engaged. We're really on the phone with somebody while we're doing our emails, or the email starts with a harsh word and boom, before you know it, you are furiously typing a reply. If you are aware or lucky enough to recover your senses, you will pause and reread before you hit send. If you are not so lucky, you will hit send and then break into a panic, realizing that your response was actually to a different email. You know, the one that you conjured up in your fight or flight flooded brain. A cartoon in the New Yorker expressed this experience. It shows a man with a sci-fi looking metal contraption over his head with the caption, "I've invented a time travel machine to go back in time and hit unsend." Sometimes deeper understanding means discerning the message behind or beyond the words. We often forget that we come to our conversations with the sum total of our experiences, all of our family history, all of our professional experiences, all of our personal interactions. Our stakes in any conversation, what it fully means to each person, will always be different. And instead of raising our voices, we would do better to stop and actively hear each other. We actually might want to start treating another's earnest words as if they came from that person's inner shofar. Remember, the mitzvah is to listen. And when we do listen well, we are attuned to the words being said, sure, but we are also keyed into what is behind or even beyond the words. That inflection, that hurt. Body language often conveys it if we would notice. Posture. So both in our public lives and in our everyday personal interactions, the strains of Kol Nidre convey an urgency to pay attention to others. As challenging as it can be to listen and really hear what others are trying to say, listening to our own voice, our own neshama, our own soul, can sometimes be more difficult. Some of us don't have a regular practice of mindfulness. Sometimes it seems like we will do anything not to hear what is often an inner cry for a hearing. Kol Nidre, the plaintive melody and its repetition, bypasses our defenses and speaks directly to our often starved souls, inviting a response. What keeps us from hearing the voice of our inner beloved, our soul? One possibility, our pain. This becomes clearer when we meditate. Most of us come to meditation to feel better in some way, and we often think that means leaving our hurts and our heartaches behind. That does sometimes happen at first, as we learn to sit quietly and calmly, but inevitably the initial relief of just having afforded ourselves time for meditation gives way to an increased awareness of our pain and all of our defenses against it. The practice of meditation or mindfulness doesn't allow us to escape discomfort, but rather to learn to sit with it and have compassion for ourselves, let alone everyone else. Naomi Shiabnai writes about the desire to escape pain in her poem, The Rider. A boy told me if he roller skated fast enough, his loneliness couldn't catch up to him. The best reason I ever heard for trying to be a champion. What I wonder tonight, pedaling hard down King William Street, is if it translates to bicycles. A victory, to leave your loneliness panting behind you on some street corner while you float free into a cloud of sudden azaleas, pink petals that have never felt loneliness, no matter how slowly they fell. Avoiding pain seems like a good idea, but there is no bicycle that will allow us to outride our sadness, our loneliness, our fears. Nevertheless, we sometimes try. We fill up our calendars. We work too much. We eat and drink too much. We over-medicate, hence the opioid epidemic, and various other things, all in order not to feel our own pain. Our soul wants to wake up, but we are desperate to go comfortably numb. And that is always a dead end. In her now famous TED Talk on vulnerability, social scientist, speaker, and author Brené Brown addresses this when she states, "You can't numb those hard feelings without numbing the other affects, our emotions. You cannot selectively numb. So when we numb those distressing feelings, we also numb joy, we numb gratitude, we numb happiness. And then we are miserable. And we are looking for purpose and meaning. And then we feel vulnerable. So then we have a couple of beers and a banana nut muffin. And it becomes this dangerous cycle." So Kol Nidre reminds us that Kol Do Di Dofek, our soul, is knocking. It needs our attention. Can we listen? I have one more wrapping on the Torah table that I am thinking of this holiest night. And it is the knock of the Holy One, HaShem, the ground of all being. God raps on the Torah table tonight and demands a hearing. In years past, it's been the other way around. We demanded the hearing. We were quick to point out all the ways that the God of our Machzor was all wrong. We wanted an explanation for all the injustice and the suffering, the seemingly random cruelty of existence. So tonight, I suggest that we all declare a ceasefire against God. For the crux of the matter is that the clamor of the battle against what we don't believe makes figuring out what we do believe very difficult. It's also spiritually exhausting. Radio show host and author Michael Krasny, in his book, Let There Be Laughter, offers, so a man for 30 years has been praying every day at the Western Wall in Jerusalem. And one day a reporter, looking for a good human interest story, interviews him and asks, "Sir, you're at the wall every day. What do you pray for?" He thinks for a second, strokes his beard that I don't have, and then replies, "I pray for peace in the Middle East, honest politicians, the end of hunger, famine, and war." "Very interesting," responds the reporter. "How does it feel to do this every day?" "Like I'm praying to a wall." Struggling with the God we don't believe in feels to me like praying to a wall. It's tiring and not so fruitful. What happens when we put down the struggle and try just to listen with our hearts? What do we hear? What do you hear? To start, here is some of what I hear when I let my defenses down and listen for God. I hear a longing for connection, compassion, love, and for shalom in the fullest sense of the word. I hear the voice of the other, the cry of oppressed people everywhere, and I recognize that our response is also God. I hear and feel in my bones the sweet song of creation as well as her cry. I hear the sound of a river, and then I feel it moving through me, a river of light carrying us all along, the river that flows from Eden, the river that waters our garden, the river of life and death and everything in between. No, I don't hear the voice of a ruler or a parent. It's okay if you do. The images that we apply to the divine are all metaphors, all attempts to describe something we actually have no words for. This is what Elijah the prophet learned. You might remember him. He comes to every Seder and every Jewish home and drinks a cup of wine. But he was actually a prophet who spoke truth to power, and it got him in trouble. He had to flee for his life. He ended up in the wilderness for 40 days and 40 nights seeking God. There was a tornado, but God was not in the tornado. There was an earthquake, but God was not there either. There was even a fire, but God was also not there. Where did Elijah find God? In the Kol Nidre, in a still small voice. We've tried to explore this evening why we chant Kol Nidre 3 times. And this is my takeaways from this exploration. Kol Nidre is repeated 3 times to emphasize the need to be heard and the need to listen. To listen to the voices of other people, whether on a large scale or within our closest, most intimate and dearest people in our lives. To listen to the voices of our own souls, our heart's deepest yearnings, and to listen for the still small voice of God, the voice of something infinite, something divine, something holy. May the power of Kol Nidre and the catharsis of Yom Kippur Day help us to bang on the Torah reading table 3 times and better express our own need to be heard. And may we listen better, more actively, and more caringly to all the voices in our lives. And let us all say, Amen. Gemar Chatima Tova. Ruchim to you.